That's where he was talking about help from America and Europe. The last thing we want is America sending troops over to restore capitalism. So, whereas native troops may not fire, foreign troops may, who are not from our, who haven't been in the same political tradition. That, of course, is the point of an international movement to help to neutralise. Each particular polity is neutralised and able to take part in its own place. And last but certainly not least, the precondition of the revolution itself is a party of sufficient size and strength to displace the weakened regime that has become the recognised opposition. This last is obviously the most important, but surprisingly, historically such opposition movements are usually rather small until the last months or couple of years of the struggle. If one considers Latin America, for example, numbers are usually in the low thousands for the 1970s and early 1980s, and also for Cuba earlier. If you consider, for example, Cuba, Castro's forces, most of his movement were actually recruited in the bloodless march across Cuba at the end when Batista was already trying to flee. It was Batista who fell, effectively, and that was with a lot of support from the unions in the cities. The Sandinistas only numbered a few thousand. The FMLN in El Salvador came close with a similar few. These are all, and Algeria as well, these are all more in the context of civil war, but the point is that their situation was far harder than the one that we expect to find in the West, hopefully. In the Algerian situation, against an extremely determined opponent, an estimated 5,000 to 10,000 successfully overthrew the French. It took them a long time. All of these were working in very harsh conditions. The Bolsheviks, the revolution that is cited, the Bolsheviks only grew to a sufficient size during the summer of 1917, during the period of I can't remember the name of the government now, the Kerensky regime. During the period of the Kerensky regime,
provisional power. Provisional
government. I wasn't quite sure if it was going to be provisional. Thank you. The Solidarity movement in Poland. Solidarity movement was largely built on mass Catholic support. And so you can go on. The common factor is they had a programme that legitimised them when the existing government fell, enlisting other forces where necessary. When the Algerians used Islam, solidarity with Catholicism, and so forth. From this, we can, as a ballpark, say that a movement of upwards of 5,000 committed members that has established itself as the power in waiting is sufficient to enter the revolutionary stage, as long as it has displaced its rivals. A common factor in all these movements is the constitution of its members, urban, educated, less the sons and daughters of the cities, usually young, sufficiently articulate to present their case, not just to outsiders, but to internalise it themselves and reproduce it long term, and committed enough to act on it. That's especially important for us, of course, because we expect our members to be able to put the case themselves rather than follow leaders and otherwise respond to a vanguard. And lastly, this organisation has to be strong enough to fail and courageous enough to take chances when they present themselves. Even a revolutionary moment is gold. It enters into practical politics what before was merely the fever dream of the oppressed, and sets the stage for a more confident future movement. The politics of the future need to break the surface of the present. Now to the second part of my talk. Given the above, how should our party proceed? Now, I should add a very strong caveat here that this is in the nature of a discussion and I am presenting, in some sense, personal positions, so based on what I consider to be party positions, because otherwise this could be considered to be party policy, which it is not. But given the first part of my talk, and given the conditions that I've described, how should we go about effecting a successful revolution? I am also speaking specifically to the UK-European situation. We conceive of similar organisations following similar patterns in areas of the world roughly characterised as democratic, but different approaches would be required in more routinely oppressive regimes, and we can't hidebound members in other countries to our kind of conditions. Now, firstly, rather than measuring our success as the building of a nebulous support for socialism of some kind amongst the largest possible cross-section of society, we should concentrate on winning the battle of ideas with rival organisations and becoming preeminent as the radical movement, the opposition to capitalism. The largest movement of recent years, I think, is obviously the SWP, certainly within the left tradition. But even though at one point they claimed 11,000 members, the fact is their committed base is and always has been far smaller. When told of the 11,000 figure, one disbelieving person went to one of their demonstrations and signed up half a dozen times in an afternoon. So that is the level of commitment that was described by their figure. Given the level of commitment required by our party to common ideas, the fact that we expect our members to understand our case and to be able to reproduce it, if we achieved a membership in the order of 2,000 to 3,000, we would probably displace organisations such as the SWP as the single most important radical organisation. From 400, 100,000 plus members for a revolution would be a pipe dream. We really, if we're talking about nebulous numbers to just amass and gradually take over the society or something, that's nonsense. But 2,000 to 3,000 is a hard climb requiring careful planning and allocation of resources. We should bear in mind that IS and SWP have followed exactly the same pattern from small numbers to do the same thing. We can do this. Attention should be given to motivation. As good materialists, we should understand that ideas are not sustained in a vacuum. Different approaches have been taken in the past for this, but a combination of meetings that involve more than administrative work and successful demonstrations should be a minimum. Social clubs have also been used successfully, combining other shared interests, etc. But that's kind of a discussion area. Secondly, information that leads to and supports a specific programme. We are very good at arguing the ins and outs of Marxism and presenting a post-capitalist society, but not so great at making our ideas sound concrete quite often, least of all in a revolutionary situation. No one will support us as a practical proposition unless we have policies that are specific to the revolutionary event, a programme, in other words. Given political support, what will a party do, how, and when? Thirdly, and following on from this, media that is more attractive to general readers. I'm not saying anything about The Standard, I help edit it, and I think it's a fantastic magazine, but the point is that it's a magazine that tends to be for committed people who are committed to politics. It's not quite the mass media that we need. That would bridge the gap between opposition to existing politics and support for the party. Anyone who's ever been sold a copy of Socialist Worker will know how important this is. It has far more profile than their meetings, demonstrations excluded. Though actually the demonstrations tend to say Socialist Worker and people associate it with the paper, not the party. Fourthly, and following from the business of attaining profile as the opposition to capitalism, at some point we have to organise our own public demonstrations. This requires much more presence than we have now, of course, but above all, self-confidence. Successful demonstrations also generate further self-confidence. Such demonstrations should, of course, be